analyst and risk consultant, to help us unpack the summit's outcomes and what they mean for SADC's future. Marissa, thank you for making time for us on this Monday. How are you?
A very good morning to you, Asanda. I'm doing great, thanks. How are you?
I'm good. Thank you so much. So, Madagascar has now assumed the SADC rotating presidency. How significant is this for the country's influence and leadership within the bloc?
Well, it's actually fascinating to see the current president of Madagascar, and I'm going to butcher his name. It's Andre Ritsuela. It's actually fascinating to see him chairing the summit because in 2009 he led a coup in Madagascar, which was the start of a couple of years long political crisis in the country. And this move actually got Madagascar suspended from SADC for a period of 5 years, and then it got readmitted in 2014. So it's quite funny to just to see how much has actually changed. But it obviously bodes well for, I think, Madagascar's prominence and standing within the regional body.
The summit addressed peace and security issues, including the situation in the DRC. Do you think SADC member states are effectively presenting a united political front?
I think they present a united political front in the sense, that there is repeated talk of the need, to resolve the ongoing security crisis in the DRC. But I think that when it does come to security matters as a whole, I think SADC is just generally very ineffective. I mean, I've just spoken about how, yes, Madagascar did get suspended for the political crisis in 2009. But if we look at what's happened in Mozambique ever since the October general elections and the ongoing security issues in the country related to political repression, we don't really see SADC taking a stand on that. And it seems to be something that it continues to sweep under the carpet. It also does nothing to address, for example, when there was a military coup in Zimbabwe, it didn't really take the same stance. So I think when it comes to security issues, SADC it can present a unified front on certain issues, but it doesn't really take action to resolve them. It never really wants to trample on countries in general, trample on other countries' sovereignty. But as a result, it means that it's not very effective at resolving these kind of security crises or political crises in the region.
And on that point, then, how realistic is it that the summit's commitments will translate into tangible political outcomes?
Yeah, I'm always very, very skeptical of this. And I mean, I can be quite harsh on SADC in general. I mean, it has made some progress in sort of setting, each country has to set up a kind of regional representation office, but many countries are behind on this. And if I look at what was discussed at the summit, they're talking about greater regional integration and greater economic integration. And I suspect that the reason why this theme has been so prominent is obviously because of global events triggered by US President Donald Trump, where he's withdrawing a lot of foreign support for countries. And obviously, countries like Madagascar, especially, are very reliant on this. Madagascar is classified as one of the poorest countries in the world, very reliant on foreign aid. But these types of talks have been going on for decades. They talk about the potential of the region's agricultural sectors. They talk about there's a lot of potential with renewable energy, but no real fundamental progress has been made in decades to actually, obviously, except for South Africa, but to have these agricultural sectors perform better, to develop agro-processing sectors. And Madagascar also has a very big challenge from climate change. It's very affected, much like Mozambique and Zimbabwe, by extreme weather events, especially flooding. It normally takes place between December and April. And it hasn't really gone away to sort of tackling these issues on its own. And I'm not really sure by announcing these commitments at a summit is going to go any sort of way to fixing this. The work needs to be done internally, and then there needs to be greater cooperation, but there needs to be tangible efforts rather than having summits and grand gestures.
On the topic of economics, SADC aims to increase manufacturing from 11% to 30% of GDP by 2030. Do you see these targets as achievable given the current infrastructure and policy environment?
Yeah, not achievable at all. I mean, 2030 it's not even 5 years away, it's 4 years away. We're nearly at the end of this year.
Mm.
I mean, South Africa is the only really industrialized economy within SADC. You've got, like you pointed out, infrastructure. We need way more development within SADC states to actually take place in order for that to be feasible. That would be a huge jump. And then again, yes, you need to have a supportive policy environment, and I don't really see that taking place in other countries, mostly because there are concerns over their politics, which naturally drives away investors. They also don't have the kind of energy needs that would support manufacturing. You've also got to tackle things like education because you don't want to import labor for things like manufacturing if the goal is to um, drive economic growth in the country and to support the country's own development. But that is going to be what has to happen. And again, I wish SADC wouldn't sort of speak about these unrealistic targets, or I mean, any government in the world really. It sounds nice on paper to say that you're going to get there by 2030, but we need to have smaller goals. It would be fine to say you want to increase it by 2% by 2030. That would already make a big difference in the lives of thousands of people, but instead, they go for these bigger grand things to make it sound like there's more being done, but it's just absolutely not realistic. And I mean, Madagascar as well is not, I think, very well integrated with SADC. It's much more integrated, especially countries in the Middle East, like the UAE. It's got greater links to countries like India and China. So for it to sort of start focusing on SADC regional integration would also be kind of a step away from how things have been done traditionally, which again also takes time and takes a lot of work.
You touch on agriculture and that having been addressed at the summit, and how it doesn't really seem like there were realistic strategies brought forward to modernize this sector. But let's talk about renewable energy now and industrial growth, which were also key priorities. How feasible is a just and inclusive energy transition in the SADC region?
I mean, the SADC region, most of the countries do have a very good renewables potential, especially with solar energy and solar much more than wind. But again, I think there is a long way to go in order for there to sort of be a kind of complete energy transition in the sense of renewable energy projects are great, but they are not able to sort of meet the entire energy needs of countries because renewable energy projects tend to be much smaller in scale than, say, coal or gas. They're obviously cheaper, they're obviously quicker to complete, which is a positive, but they're not able to sort of add all this extra capacity. But the other issue that most countries have, and including South Africa, is that there's not enough development of transmission and distribution infrastructure. So even if the region is able to generate as much power as it can, and it can do this through renewables, it's not going to be able to feed that into the grid. So there's all of these kind of intertwined problems that I don't think have been adequately addressed. And then I think, if we sort of take a step back and we look more broadly at, the just energy transition and the kind of narrative around it,
Mhm.
and I mean this globally, we can really kind of see a sort of dip in support for it in the sense of obviously the US administration underneath Donald Trump is not a fan of this. It really wants to continue to promote fossil fuels. Most African states want to promote fossil fuels. We've even seen a slight difference in the way that some EU member states talk about the subject. So I think that, again, the just energy transition is something where the narrative is also changing and also shifting. So it's good for SADC to speak about renewable energy, but again, it needs to take into account expanding the grid as well and the investment that they need for that, and perhaps also realize that there may not be as much support for renewable energy projects coming externally, and not many states necessarily have the capacity to
Mm.
carry out these projects themselves.
Marissa, we'll leave it there for today. Again, we appreciate your insights and for making time.
Great, thanks so much for having me on the show.
Great. That's